For decades, the US green card has been the ultimate symbol of stability, opportunity, and long-term security. But quietly, without headlines, Washington is rewriting how permanent residency works. Not by closing the doors completely, but by narrowing who gets through. And if current policy trends continue, 7 Asian countries could face the biggest restrictions yet by 2026. Not because their people stopped applying, but because the system itself is changing. Stay until the end, because one of these countries may surprise you, and the reason matters more than the list. First, let's be clear, the US is not banning green cards. What's happening is more subtle and more powerful. Tighter scrutiny, longer backlogs, country-specific caps, policy shifts driven by politics, labor pressure, and border enforcement. Green cards are increasingly treated as a strategic resource, not a right. And countries with high overstay rates, large backlogs, fraud concerns, or sudden surges in applications are facing quiet slowdowns that feel like closures. Now let's talk about the countries most exposed to this shift. 1. India, the backlog that became a barrier. India faces the largest green card backlog in US immigration history by a wide margin. This isn't a recent problem. It's the result of decades of demand colliding with rigid country caps. Highly skilled Indian professionals dominate US employment-based visas. Technology, engineering, medicine, research, they qualify. They contribute, they follow the rules. Yet many are told to wait 10, 20, even 30 years for permanent residency. By 2026, that wait itself becomes the issue. As US policymakers push merit-based immigration narratives, India's pipeline draws scrutiny, not because applicants lack merit, but because the numbers are overwhelming. Reform proposals often sound neutral: reduce per-country backlogs, balance global representation, protect domestic labor. But in practice, these shifts could mean slower approvals, tighter caps, priority reshuffling that pushes Indian applicants further back. For Indian immigrants, the crisis isn't rejection, it's time spent in limbo. Careers are built on temporary visas, families delay decisions, children age out of eligibility. By the time a green card arrives, life has already moved on. For millions of Indians, the American dream isn't denied, it's indefinitely postponed. 2. China. China's green card situation isn't driven by volume alone, it's driven by politics. Over the past few years, US-China relations have reshaped how Chinese immigration cases are handled, quietly but decisively. Heightened national security reviews are now standard, especially for applicants connected to technology, engineering, research, academia. Even highly qualified, fully documented candidates face extended background checks, repeated requests for evidence, security clearances that take years, not months. Nothing is technically denied. But everything is delayed. By 2026, this scrutiny could intensify further as the US tightens controls around data security, intellectual property, strategic industries. For Chinese nationals, the challenge isn't legality. It's uncertainty. Applications stall without explanation. Timelines disappear. Approvals move forward, then stop. Families plan their lives around dates that never arrive. And here's the quiet reality. When geopolitical tension rises, immigration becomes leverage. The door to US permanent residency remains open on paper, but it opens slower, it opens selectively. And sometimes it barely opens at all. For many Chinese applicants, the American dream hasn't ended. It's just stuck in a system shaped by forces far bigger than them. 3. Philippines. For decades, family-based immigration has been the backbone of Filipino green card access. Parents sponsoring children, children sponsoring parents, siblings waiting patiently, sometimes for decades. This system built one of the largest and most established Filipino communities in the United States. But it is also the pathway now under the most pressure. Family categories face lengthening wait times, strict annual quota caps, increased scrutiny over documentation and relationships. For many Filipino applicants, the process isn't fast, but it's familiar. The problem is that familiarity no longer guarantees stability. By 2026, immigration policy discussions increasingly frame family reunification as non-essential compared to employment-based visas, high-skilled labor programs, merit-driven selection systems, and when family categories are deprioritized, the Philippines is hit early and hard. Because demand is high, because waiting lists are long, because even minor paperwork issues can reset timelines by years. Fraud investigations, often triggered by a small percentage of cases, cast a shadow over thousands of legitimate applications. Suddenly, interviews become more intense. Evidence standards rise and approvals slow. For families, the cost isn't just administrative. It's time apart, missed milestones. Parents aging while paperwork moves inches at a time. The door to U.S. permanent residency for Filipinos is still open. But it's narrower than before, and if family-based immigration loses priority in future reforms, the Philippines won't feel it as a policy shift. It will feel it as families waiting longer, together but apart. Number 4. Nepal. Nepal's immigration risk doesn't come from large numbers. It comes from fragile pathways. Many Nepali nationals entered the United States legally through student visas, temporary protected pathways, short-term humanitarian or educational programs. For years, these routes offered stability, or at least the appearance of it. But these protections are temporary by design. When they expire, legal status doesn't fade gradually. It collapses. There is often no buffer period, no automatic transition, no safety net. One missed renewal, one denied extension, one delayed decision, and a lawful presence turns unlawful overnight. This is where Nepal's vulnerability becomes visible, not because of criminal behavior, not because of security threats, but because overstay data tells a different story. When large numbers of people fall out of status at the same time, enforcement attention follows. U.S. immigration systems don't evaluate intention. They evaluate documentation. They don't ask why someone stayed. They ask whether someone still qualifies. For Nepali nationals who built lives around education or temporary protection, this creates a dangerous gap. Years invested, degrees earned, communities formed, all resting on paperwork that can vanish with a policy shift. By 2026, as temporary programs face tighter renewals and stricter eligibility reviews, Nepal risks becoming a statistical priority, not a political one. And that distinction matters, because enforcement driven by data is quiet. It's procedural, and it moves without warning headlines. For Nepali applicants, the issue isn't ambition, it's timing. And when timing fails, the system rarely waits. Number 5. Bangladesh. Bangladesh isn't facing an outright ban. What it's facing is something more subtle: delay. In recent years, application numbers from Bangladesh have risen sharply. More employment petitions, more family-based filings, more asylum claims driven by economic pressure and political uncertainty. And with volume comes scrutiny. U.S. immigration systems respond to spikes the same way every time. They slow down. They verify more. They question harder. For Bangladeshi applicants, this means stronger examination of identity documents, employment histories, educational credentials, asylum narratives, not because fraud is assumed, but because consistency is demanded. One discrepancy, one missing record, one translation error, and a case that once moved forward quietly can stall for years. This is how Bangladesh becomes flagged, not banned, not publicly restricted, but quietly filtered. Processing times stretch, requests for evidence multiply, interview approvals shrink, and the impact is psychological as much as legal. When systems slow down, people hesitate. Families delay plans, employers withdraw sponsorship. Applicants give up before decisions are made. That's the unspoken effect of procedural pressure. By 2026, if application volume continues rising without policy expansion, Bangladesh risks being caught in a bottleneck where eligibility exists but access doesn't. Because in immigration, denial is loud, but delay is invisible and often just as final. Number 6. Pakistan. For Pakistan, the challenge isn't eligibility, it's scrutiny. Security screening plays an outsized role in nearly every immigration pathway involving Pakistani nationals, employment-based, family-sponsored, and even diversity visas. Applications move, then pause. Not because something is wrong, but because everything must be checked, again and again. Enhanced background reviews. Extended name checks, interagency clearances that operate on no public timeline. For applicants, this creates a unique kind of uncertainty. Cases aren't denied quickly, they're held. Months turn into years, visa numbers expire, employers move on. Families wait without answers. Even highly skilled professionals, gongchengshu, doctors, researchers, find themselves stuck in administrative processing with no clear explanation and no way to accelerate the outcome. Over time, this pattern produces a secondary effect, higher denial rates. Not always because applicants fail requirements, but because prolonged delays increase the chances of policy changes mid-process, documentation expiring, sponsors withdrawing, background thresholds tightening. By 2026, if security-driven vetting continues to expand without procedural reform, Pakistani green card applicants may face an increasingly narrow window where approval is technically possible but practically rare. The system doesn't say no outright, it waits, and for many, waiting becomes the answer. Number 7. Vietnam. Vietnam has experienced a noticeable surge in green card applications in recent years. Families sponsoring relatives, entrepreneurs seeking investor-linked pathways, professionals entering on employment-based visas. At first glance, this looks like opportunity. More applicants mean more chances, right? Not necessarily. When numbers rise quickly, the US system reacts cautiously. High application volume triggers heightened verification, more documentation requests, and longer waiting periods. Even fully qualified Vietnamese applicants can feel the impact. Interviews delayed by months, sometimes years, additional checks on financial documents or family ties, increased scrutiny on educational and business credentials. The system isn't trying to block anyone. It's simply managing risk. But managing risk in immigration terms translates to slower approvals, more uncertainty, and potential denials for those who might otherwise qualify. For many Vietnamese nationals, this creates a quiet tension. You meet the requirements, follow the rules, yet the timeline stretches unpredictably. Meanwhile, families wait, investments are delayed, career plans shift. By 2026, if these trends continue, Vietnamese applicants could find themselves in a delicate position. The door to US permanent residency remains open, but it moves slower than ever before. The key reality is simple. Growth brings attention. Attention brings caution. And caution, in the immigration world, is almost always a restriction in disguise. This isn't about one president. It's about long-term shifts. Border pressure, domestic labor protection, political polarization, election cycle immigration hardening. By 2026, the US wants fewer permanent residents but more temporary workers. That changes everything. Green cards become harder, visas become conditional, stability becomes delayed. If you're planning your future around a green card, you need to understand this. The rules may not change overnight, but timelines will, and uncertainty is the new policy tool. The biggest risk isn't denial. It's waiting your best years in limbo. So here's the truth. The American dream isn't disappearing. But access is becoming selective, strategic, and slower. If you're from one of these countries, awareness is your advantage. Don't rely on old advice. Don't assume yesterday's pathway still exists. And don't make life decisions without understanding policy trends. If this video clarified things for you, share it with someone planning to immigrate. It could save them years of uncertainty. And if you want clear, honest breakdowns of global immigration shifts, subscribe to Global Pulse. Because in a world of changing borders, information is power.